Before you start crucifying me on the comment section because you're about, hey, what are you saying? No, listen, I said why looking poor. I did not say being poor. I said why looking poor is important for the purposes of growth. And before I say anything, by the way, go ahead and hit that like button and make sure that you subscribe, turn that notification bell, and comment on the comment section. This is what I mean. See, when I say why looking poor is important for the purposes of growth, this is the reason. Okay, now let me ask a very simple question. See, there is a difference between looking as if you think and you do not, and looking as if you do think, but or rather looking as if you do not think but you do. So you have to understand those two parameters, that they are different. So when I say it is good to look poor, because that helps you to grow. Would you believe if I tell you one thing? Most of the people have actually, sort of didn't manage or not managing to achieve their goal as far as the finances are concerned, simply on the basis of trying to prove a point to people that indeed I'm not struggling financially. I can be able to achieve this, I can be able to achieve the other thing. Okay? Now, in that kind of a sort of a thing called competition, trying to prove a point to people, you end up consuming your money. For example, say this. We have an individual. Let me just put something on the board. You know, I love writing, okay? Do you know what they say? If you think it, you ink it. See, let's pick an average person who is earning 45,000 Kenyan shilling a month, okay? Now, this individual, obviously, that is not a huge chunk of cash. Quite presentable in Kenya, but it's not that money that you can say, hey, I'm earning like a... No, just an average. Why? Because this amount of money of this individual, let's say he managed to save like 10 G's a month, okay? 10 G's a month. Now, this guy has been so much loyal to his savings, and he has managed to save, say, for 2 years. This guy has saved for 2 years. Now, this guy, obviously, the year 1 is 120, year 2 is 120. We are talking about 240. And then this guy is approached by a company that sells cars. And this guy is told, hey, you know what? You can actually buy a car worth 1.4 mic or 1.4 million. Or what you need to do is just make 250,000 deposit, and then the rest can be paid for the next 48 months. And by the way, there is nothing wrong with owning a car. It's an amazing thing. I mean, go ahead and own it. But the question is, just because you can be able to quote unquote afford it does not mean you should go for it. So the guy goes ahead and sacrifices the 250,000 Kenyan shilling, and then the guy is told, hey, you know what? Each and every month you have to set aside 10,000. So it goes, whatever he saves goes. And of course, what he has already saved goes. Guess what happens now? The guy is left with what? Zero cash flow. And that case regard, the guy acquired this car worth 1.5 million. Gets to do what? Obviously to hang around with friends, and of course to enter into that category of guys who owns a car, all those kind of things. Now the point is this: the guy looks rich. Okay, the guy does what? Looks rich. Looks. There's a difference between being rich and actually looking rich. So the guy looks rich, but indeed, is the guy rich? Okay, fine. I know rich is that term that it does not mean same for different people. I know some people, hey, him owning that car, maybe that's what defines the richest. Obviously, sure, that may apply, but the reality is, what happens? The dude is actually struggling. If the guy gets fired, guess what happens now? The guy probably has not even finished servicing for the car loan. And that particular point, the guy has not even put any systems and structure for him to actually get some cash flow in case something happens. Now, this is the point. See, when I say looking rich, is you living in a situation whereby you do not have to prove a point. You don't have to prove that you want something. By the way, sometimes if you go to my comment section, I get this comment. Oh, Joseph, you're telling me all those ideas. What have you done? Do you invest on those areas? You should be a billionaire somewhere. If you are wealthy, you could be sharing these ideas. Can you just imagine that kind of an individual? Does it mean now I should be talking? I should just be somewhere, shut up? Like, you probably that individual is arguing from point of ignorance, jealousy, bitter. Some people are suffering from mental health. So you have to understand all that kind of a case scenario. So the point is this: see, if you live a life where you don't have to prove a point, then it means you proving a point. It means you consuming money. Remember, there is actually an expenses that I shared with you sometimes back, and I told you that expenses is called fit-in expenses. There is something called fit-in expenses. Okay, these fit-in expenses is simply amount of money that you set aside so to fit that where you actually live. By the way, did you know this? If you migrate from one location to the other, guess how many things that get affected? Number one, school fees that you pay for your kids. okay, it gets affected. For example, let's say you move from a low income area to a relatively, say, medium income area. Then it means there's a school fees for your kids have actually changed. Okay, now when you migrate from one point to the other, school fees is changed. Number two, transport, obviously. All right. Three, rent changes because obviously you have to pay more. Five, actually what we call normal expenses actually changes. Why? For example, where you come from, probably the cost of living for the simple things is actually quite affordable. But if you migrate to a different area, now this area that you've actually migrated simply because you want to prove a point, I'm living a life. Therefore, you're living a lie to prove to people indeed you're doing well financially. You forget one thing. We were not actually investing. We were not making, let's say even it's true you are actually wealthy and you're rich and you're making money. The point was not to get it to prove to people that you have it. The point was to get it, to have it, to own it, to be wealthy, to live a comfortable life where you do not have to worry about money, but you can think about money. You have to understand those two different parameters or those two different terms. Now, the point when I say looking poor is important for the purposes of what? Because I hate poverty with all my heart. When I say looking poor, you might actually be capable of purchasing something, but at that particular point, just because you have that money, it is not the best time to acquire that thing. You can delay the gratification. You can delay the acquisition for the purposes of channeling that money to a far much better gig that will give you the return. Then that's what you get from the return can now take you to you acquiring or acquisition of that what you could have acquired before you actually being stable. Let's say you only have something like 2 million. That is the money that you've saved by yourself, 2 million. And then there is a car that is being sold for 1.4 million. Well, based on the numbers, you qualify. But based on the finances, the personal finance growth and taking care of yourself, the emergency funds and what have you, you do not qualify. Say, this is when we say, just because you can quote unquote afford it does not mean you should get it. Now, the question is this: do you need it or do you want it? Now, if you go for that what you want it, guess what happens now? You actually get what we call the fit-in expenses that makes you look wealthy, but indeed you are not. You are because you're struggling financially. So when I say looking poor, this is when you conceal your identity in terms of the finances. Just live below your means. You can afford it. You're not even struggling financially, but you can just delay the gratification. You conceal the financial muscles for the purposes of spending your money for you to invest. You spend to invest. Once you spend to invest, that what is brought in from the investment as the AKA passive income or the baby money, now that can actually help you to go and acquire that what you want. Now, that's what we say, or that's what we call looking poor. It actually helps you to grow financially. For example, can you imagine this? Living in a lifestyle that you do not have to dress expensively for it. Can you assume this? I don't know for how long you've been watching my videos. Assume things. What if I was making my videos from 5-star hotels? I have to move from one 5-star hotel to the other, making these videos. And to prove a point about, I don't know, finances and what have you, obviously my cost of production would skyrocket because I need to book that particular place. Probably I have to rent the space where I can actually make that video or something of sort, and I have to show up in a suit if that's what I showed you from the term go. Then I have to buy myself a trail of suits to always appear on a video, and then of course go to the next 5-star and the next 5-star and the next 5-star. Guess what happens now? The cost of production of a single video goes up. Therefore, I will be struggling to make sure that I retain the status that I'm having out here. And this is why most of the celebrities that we have, not only in Kenya but globally, there is that picture that they portray to you that they are perfect beings. They ought to drive the best car. They ought to dress the nicest clothing and what have you. They ought to live in a quite elegant places and what have you. Whenever you meet them on the ways, they should throw money to you and what have you. That's what mentality we have in our country. For example, in Kenya, the politicians politicians have to dish out money, because people have this perception that these guys, if you've ever been a leader, then by default you ought to be rich or wealthy. Now, with that case, if you let that thing sink deep inside of you, then it means you go to a point of even borrowing to fund the consumables to indeed live or actually maintain that status that is expected of you by the majority. And guess what happens now? Unless that thing is making you money, when you fake, you make the money. And if it is not, guess what happens now? You sink into the debt to actually live a life where or which the people or external forces have actually placed you. So in that all that time, you're not existing as you. You're existing as what they want. And when you exist as what they want, then at that particular point, you actually cut down the percentage, or you cut down the, what you call the financial muscles or the financial power to help you to have that power to actually invest and grow yourself to the next level. So I hope I'm proving a point to this particular point. Now, what happens is that you just live a life that you don't have to prove a point. You live below your means. You delay the gratification instead of having what you call the instant gratification. And then then again, you see, there is a very thin line between delaying gratification, denying yourself all those expenses on the purposes of pumping that money into investments so that later you can enjoy. I have seen also people who delays the gratification, lives below their means. They pump in their money into the investment. They become derailed to a point whereby they don't even remember to actually live a presentable life. The truth and the reality is this: it is good to have a balance between the two. Know when you're supposed to sacrifice to acquire the things, and know indeed when you can actually go ahead and buy that phone that you want, go for that vacation, go for that staycation, go for that clothing, go for that branding, and go for that specific thing. When you know you already have the systems in place that can be able to finance and fund that lifestyle that you've been admiring and that what you worked for all that long period of time. So it is good to understand that. Did I say that it's not good to live a better life? No, I did not say that. I 100%, personally, I love to live a better life. And guess what happens now? What you're supposed to do, just because you can afford to go live in a house worth 50,000, 60, 100, 200,000, does not mean necessarily you have to go there. Ask yourself, I'm about to add another expense on top of what I have. Did I create another source of income out there? That is a question that people do not ask themselves. Okay, for example, say there is an increment of my salary by 10,000, 15,000. Now I'm about to migrate from the one bedroom that I have of 15,000 to the one of 20,000. So the 10,000 that have been added, I'm about to cut the 5,000 to put it in a rent. So the question is this: I've been added this 15,000. Have I added something else in terms of the extra income? Because things can happen. I can get fired tomorrow morning, I'm not on a job. So have I actually created a reliable system that can help me to fund this lifestyle that I'm about to delve myself into? So if you ask yourself all these questions in combination, then you can be able to, sort of come up with a solution that actually works for you. And I really hope you've resonated together on this particular video. And if you did, then go ahead and leave me a comment on the comment section. Leave a comment out there. Share this video if you're in a position to. And if you would like to get a hold of me or my services, you can go ahead and grab that number from the description of this specific video. Shoot me a call. We can have a discussion for just a cup of coffee's price. For now, it's a goodbye and see you in the next one.